Let's do this. Hey, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Karen Hilton, and welcome to Monday Morning Jumpstart here in the Rock Your Vision Masterclass community. This is a beautiful and powerful space where I and a lot of other amazing leaders get together every single Monday right here at 8:15 Eastern Daylight Time to talk about some of the things that help us do life on our own terms. You know, when I started this space at the beginning of quarantine, I honestly wasn't quite sure where we were going to be stepping into, but what I've discovered is that everybody has come along with us. And I've decided to welcome every Monday some of the leaders that I look up to, some of the folks that are in my network and in my community. Some of them have been around for a long time, and some of them are really, really new. But still, we've tackled some of the topics that have meant the most to this community. So I want to thank all of you who have kind of jumped in and gone along on the ride with us. And I want to thank those of you who have sent us questions, who have participated in our mini master classes, and all that sort of a thing. It's been an amazing ride. And so we're going to go along today, and I've got two amazing leaders. We're going to tackle a topic. I mean, we're really going in today, so strap in, but make sure you've got your coffee, your tea, whatever it is. I've got mine right here, so I'm settling in. I want to introduce to you today our guests. We have none other than Lawrence Henderson. Good morning, Lawrence.
Good morning, Karen. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for joining me this morning.
My absolute pleasure.
Awesome. I'm going to let you introduce yourself in just a second
All right.
and tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are. But I want to pop over to our next guest, Miss Hilary Wilkie. Come on. Good morning, Hilary.
Hey,
How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good.
Good. Are you guys ready to tackle this topic that's kind of nobody wants to really touch it, but we gonna touch it. We're gonna go in this morning, okay?
Let's
Good
do
morning.
it.
Yes, let's do it. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Christy Kent. Beverly Wilkes. What? Good morning, sis. Glad to have you. I happen to know that Vanessa Aliaga, our operations manager, is joining us. Good morning. There she is. I am happy to see all of you this morning. This is your Monday morning jumpstart. And if you've got your coffee, just give me an emoji, or your bullet coffee or your water or whatever it is. Give us an emoji and let us know you're here. We want to welcome you into this conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about something powerful. We're going to be talking about the conversations that none of us want to have. Right now, the phrase, "how you doing?" is kind of loaded, isn't it? Like, people ask a question in the grocery store. I've witnessed it with my own eyes, and people are like, "I'm fine." Like, do you really want to know the answer to that? And we want to talk about it. I'm always curious about what on earth is going on with the folks in my network, the leaders that I serve. And so as I've watched this kind of play out, I've also watched it play out in my own life. So we're going to talk about that. Good morning, Caroline Rast, another one of our community members. And y'all, today is her birthday and the birthday of her little boy, one of my godsons. So happy birthday, Boo. I see you. Anyway, so we're going to talk about this, this dynamic that's happening right now. And why is it happening? It's happening because there is so much going on in the world. One of the things that I've heard a lot of is people saying, "Oh, I'm exhausted." If one more person talks about the news, if one more person talks about the civil unrest that's going on, if one more person asks me how I'm doing, if one more person says they're upset, I hear it all across the board. And we're going to talk about why. But before we do any of that, I want my guests to pop in and just introduce themselves. And what I'd love for you to do, Lawrence and Hilary, is after you introduce yourself, just kind of share what has this experience been like for you, where you're watching in your community, with your clients, with your friends, in your family, when people are talking about either being exhausted from all of the stuff that's in the news right now, or maybe they're just, maybe they're feeling extremely sensitive and they don't know what to say. Maybe share with us. Lawrence, I'm going to let you start. Why don't you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do, and then share what's been your experience.
Yeah, thank you again, Karen, for this opportunity. So I'm Lawrence Henderson. Call myself the Chief Learning Officer of Business Operational Support Services, LLC, but acronym BOSS.
Got it.
And what I do is I am a leadership and development coach, trainer, and speaker. But what all that means is I go into organizations seeking to help them define their language as it pertains to organizational leadership and organizational structure. And in this season, I would say I am better. And I hate the default button of good or fine because it's not true. I'm better. And as I've tried to process, and again, if we go back to that last week of May with the George Floyd incident, that was Memorial Day. And so as a veteran, I was already processing just the soldiers that I lost over the years and the people I've been connected to from that side of it, and wanting to be grateful, but in a sense, being mourning not only soldiers, but mourning the another Black man in our community. And I would say that week was rough for me because I was having to do webinars, podcasts, and coaching while not being okay. And it wasn't until that Friday where I really began to process what was really happening with me. The pit in my stomach that I was having was really around, man, I've deployed, I've been to all these other third world countries, and it was just trying to process being not being safe at home here in the US, and because of my identity and having to process that. And I got to the place where I'm okay not being okay. And as a coach, I've been holding the space for my clients to really not be okay and not be judged in that and process how they need to process, because I was having to do that same thing, and to just push that button and be on all the time. I totally relate with the exhaustion part, and not just from the personal side of it, but the explaining of why I'm so exhausted or why I'm feeling a certain way. And I said it last week during a talk with the organization. I said, imagine the mental fragility of having to help other people be okay with you not being okay. Just think about that. Like you're doing development, you're doing coaching, you're doing training, but I have to go into extra explanation of why I'm not okay. And so that, I would say, has been a different opportune moment because I think we're going to go in this conversation, just how organizations, if your values aren't floating to the top in these situations, and it just seems like a PR op or some other things that you've defaulted to, then you might really need to reevaluate some things, because these are the moments where values like empathy and having these conversations and helping your people and yourselves feel seen, heard, and valued in this season enough to seek to understand while you're processing through this. And again, this isn't just a one shot across the bow. This is going to be a constant check-in where we're needing to start with heart before we start with head and performance. Our world is different. This is really going to be the way we do things moving forward, is start with heart. Then you start with the position description of a person.
Wow. Woo, you said a lot in all of that, Lawrence. We could just stay right there. But let me just stop for just a moment. And I need the community to rally for just a moment. Lawrence, I want to acknowledge you. I want to thank you for your service. And I know that can fall on deaf ears. But our men and women in service have heard, seen, witnessed, and lived through some things. And so as a daughter of a military officer, you have a special place in my heart. But also as my brother, as an African-American man, as a member of the community, that I live in every single day. I just want to thank you for showing up in this space today to courageously go where many people don't want to go, and to do so in the midst of you working it out. Now, let me just say to the rest of you that are leaders watching this live stream this morning that we all do that. Leadership at the end of the day, in its simplest form, is about doing the things that nobody else wants to do and doing it first. And so, it's my joy and privilege to have you here to hear your heart, but also to hear your message. Because I think you've got something to say. I've been watching you for a while and following along on your journey. And I just love the way that you show up. So thank you for that. Community, I need y'all to thank Lawrence for his service, and just to salute him in this community. Would you all do that in the comments and just thank him? Say that we appreciate you and really appreciate you showing up in this space. You said some things that I think are really powerful. We're going to come back to that, but I'm going to ask Hilary to jump in and introduce herself and maybe share, Hilary, from your perspective, whether it's your life or work perspective, kind of what are you seeing now in this space where people are afraid to talk to each other and have conversations?
So I'm Hilary Wilkie. So I am a product and business analyst. I actually run my own now, and I work with different clients. What I work with clients mainly on is transformation of their product. But as Lawrence and I kind of were discussing a minute ago, is that when we transform products or software, we transform people and their processes along with those, right? Product change means organizational change. And all of what I do starts with empathy. And so I loved that. I love to start with empathy because we have to identify when I'm talking with people that are about to embark. They know that this change is coming. The emotions that they're feeling are anxiety and fear, and they have questions and they feel like it's forced on them, right? There's all these emotions. My job is to get out of them what this new system needs to have. But I can't start doing that work until I identify and relate where they are, right? And so that all of that comes into play here because that's where we're at too in this space, in this time, whether it be about COVID or George Floyd and race. And race is a huge topic for me. Karen and Lawrence already know this, but for all of you guys, I have 2 mixed race children, and a very interesting blended family. My brother's marrying a full-blooded Navajo, and my sister has Filipino children, and this crazy blended family, right? But all of that blend also brings some interesting conflict and some differing views on how things are. Yeah. I live in the South, and a lot of my family lives in the West Coast. Very different cultures, very different ways of viewing things. So what I'm seeing right now is this desire to talk about it, but not knowing how to get the conversation started and how to avoid the intense emotion.
Right.
I have intense emotion around it because I identify and have a personal story with it, right? I have experiences that have shaped where I'm at. I think that that's where we have to start. And that's where I try to start, is identify where they are. I know that there's certain people that just don't feel that if you say white privilege, I mean, that's just like, I'm not privileged. Yeah, there's suddenly a wall. And so you're not going to have, they're not ready for that conversation. So you got to start somewhere else, right? It's how do we create the bridge before we throw a bomb, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
You said how do we create a bridge before we kind of launch into the deep
mhm,
in a conversation?
yep,
Wow.
it's hard.
It is hard. And I want to just kind of take a step back for a moment to talk about the types of conversations that we may be having, right? Because I think, when you kind of lump it all into one big group, it can get really complicated. The reality is there are lots of different kinds of conversations we may be having, right? We may be having work conversations. We may be having conversations with family members or trusted friends, um, both black and white. We may be having political conversations. We may be having religious conversations or faith-based conversations. We may be having, community, legal, legislative type conversations. They're all different types of conversations that we may be having. And so, for the purpose of our discussion, part of what I want to focus on today is the interpersonal dynamic of having conversation, because every other kind of conversation we have starts with the conversation between you and me, right? It starts with the person that you're sitting across from, or it starts with the person that maybe you live next to. We've all had those conversations. And so I want to unpack some of that, because what I know is incredibly important, and Hilary and Lawrence, as leadership experts, both know that, how you navigate a conversation has everything to do with the outcome. And I'm very outcome focused. So, what does it look like when you get to the end of that conversation? We can talk about anything, but if you don't navigate that with the end in mind, you're going to get stuck. Okay, so that's the first thing. We recognize there are lots of different kind of conversations, um, and we want to acknowledge that. But there are also two kinds of timings involved in the conversations that we may be having. They may be scheduled, right? We need to talk. Nobody likes to hear that, right? Or maybe they're impromptu, like the conversation I had with somebody in my neighborhood who just walked up to me while I was filling my bird feeder and just proceeded to kind of, share, 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 share. And I was like, a blue jay is going to land on my head any minute. I need to move. Can we, take it over here? So you'll have those scheduled and impromptu conversations. And the reality is that you can experience some of the dynamics of what we're talking about, emotion or upset or confusion or whatever, in any of those moments when you are scheduled and you're going to sit down and you can prepare. Your emotions can get hijacked in any environment, whether you're white or black or whatever. Your emotions can get hijacked in a scheduled conversation or in an impromptu conversation. So I want to talk about some of the things that some of the dynamics and mechanics of having difficult conversations, because in this season when we almost can't we can't avoid politics and talking about the effects of being in quarantine and all of those things, my goal here is not to choose sides, right? The reality is that the Rock Your Vision Masterclass community is incredibly diverse, and it will stay that way. Our goal is not to pick sides for you. Our goal is to make space for you. And if that means that you feel one way or the other way, then we welcome that. So long as it's respectful, we treat each other with dignity and respect, and we're making progress towards identifying what it means to do life on our own terms, then we want to be leaders in this space to go first. We want to go into that space. So there are a couple of things that I think are really important for a successful discussion. And so I'm going to share some of these, and I want you to write them down. And by the way, I just want to take a moment and breathe a little bit and thank all of you that are in the live stream comments. If you're watching us right now, go ahead and click on the video and come on into the conversation. We want you to just let us know you're here, number one, but also send us your questions. This is the space and the time when you have an experienced leader, you have two executive coaches, and we are sharing out of our heart. We're holding nothing back here. So share your comments, thoughts, and ideas. So here's the first thing. A successful discussion starts before it starts. A successful discussion starts before it starts. And I'm going to unpack that a moment, but just stick with me for a minute. The second thing is this: if you are a leader, meaning you are responsible for other people, maybe that means that you have a team and you have direct reports, or maybe it means that you are influencing others. Maybe you're an individual contributor. Maybe you're a parent. Guess what, boo? You're a leader. Maybe you are a community leader, a pastor, or maybe you're on a worship team, or maybe you work on a nonprofit. You are a leader. In my book and in my world, leadership doesn't so much have to do with the title, it has to do with the role. Can I get an amen? Can I get an amen? That's real. In order for us to walk out, in order for the country to walk this out, we have to stop standing by in the sidelines. I don't care what side you're on. And we have to find a way to move forward in a productive and positive and powerful way. And with that, I'll say this. Here's my second point. Not leading is not an option. I just set somebody free. Not leading is not an option. If you prefer not to lead, we need to be having another type of conversation. If you prefer not to lead, we need to have another conversation. Now, it has nothing to do with, oh, you're going to feel rainbows and butterflies every time you have a difficult conversation. I do that for a living, and I have to brace myself every time. But it's important to remember that not leading is not an option. We have to step up to the plate, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that. But here's another thing. Here's another point. Not talking is not an option. Not talking is not an option. If you have people that are watching you, following you, that you're responsible for, not talking is not an option. I've got great news, because today we're going to begin to unpack some of the secrets in the world of coaching that you can leverage to have powerful conversations where you hold space for the other person, but you also honor your own values and space. I could go on. All right. Now I want to give you a few tips. And Hilary and Lawrence, I'm gonna ask you, just so you can kind of be thinking about some of the tips that you use to have difficult conversations. So here are mine. First, check your own emotions. Gonna get an amen from somebody, anybody. Come on. Check your own emotions. How many times have you been in a conversation where maybe it's impromptu and somebody just catches you in the hallway and they're like, hey, I've been meaning to talk to you, right? Or you get that classic, like we were talking about a second ago, we need to talk. Like, that's never a good sound. It's never a good conversation, right? But you got to check your emotions. And so if you are having one of those scheduled conversations where somebody says, we need to talk, the very first thing you do is, if you feel your emotions kind of kicking into high gear, right? Your amygdala is going off, then take a deep breath. And I want all of us to do this right now. Come on, y'all are leaning in with me. This is just family talk. Every one of you, I want you to take a deep breath, and I want you to take a deep breath from your diaphragm. Put your hand right underneath your chest area. Put your feet on the floor and take a deep breath. Even though some of you just woke up, you can hardly breathe. If you do that, I want you to take a deep breath. Put your hand right underneath that chest area and take a deep breath, slow. How many of you, by show of hands in the comments, felt tight? I felt tight because I've been running all morning. I woke up, sat straight up, and I'm like, what time is it? And I've been running ever since. Like, that's literally the first time I've taken a deep breath. So when you're about to have a difficult conversation, take a deep breath. What that does is it oxygenates your brain. That is an absolute fact. I am not a scientist and I'm not a psychiatrist, but I can tell you for a fact that taking that deep breath oxygenates your body. Coach Alicia Newton is here this morning. Good morning, Coach Alicia. She says, yes, check your emotions. Where are they? We had Coach Alicia actually scheduled to come on this morning, and we're going to have her on another show because that's kind of her specialty. Coach Akila Charlemagne, good morning, Coach Akila. She says, checking your emotions is so key. Pause and reflect on where you are and how you feel. Now, that is not mumbo jumbo, that's wisdom. Coach Akila is dropping some wisdom nuggets. She says it's okay in the moment to walk away, literally and figuratively, and then come back to a conversation. It's okay to step to the restroom to kind of catch your breath and center yourself before you have a powerful conversation. So check your own emotions. Here's another one. Come on, I'm about to get an amen in here. Check your own agenda. I'm going to get up and run around the room for a minute. Check your own agenda and check the narratives that you have in your head. I am married to the love of my life, and we will have a conversation. He'll say, honey, we need to talk. And I'm like, oh, Lord Jesus. Okay, give me a minute. And I'm locked and loaded. Oh, I know what he's going to talk to me about. I got him. Anybody? Y'all mighty quiet this morning. It's true. You have a narrative in your head about what you think the conversation is about to be. And what do? You formulate an answer before you've ever had a conversation. How many of us do this in difficult conversations? We don't make space for what the other person is bringing because we've already formulated an agenda. Process prior. That's the way I say it. Process prior. Get your emotions out and ask yourself this question. Ask yourself this question. Are you ready? How true is what I'm saying ahead of the conversation? How true is it? You haven't even had the conversation. Come on. Here's another one. Develop others' awareness. We talk a lot about self-awareness. Develop others' awareness. Hilary and I have talked about this many, many times, not just getting in touch with what you're feeling, but begin to open yourself up to what's happening with the other person. Right? Come on, that's good, y'all. That's good. Okay. Lawrence, Hilary, I need y'all to drop some wisdom nuggets about your tips and tricks for having difficult conversations. Lawrence, let's start with you. What do you got?
All right. So first, I mean, we can go ahead and pass the collection plate. We done. Just raise the offering.
Okay.
Well, and I think you start at a good place, right? And really, when you check in with yourself, it's not only in the intention, right? And you talk about the outcome. Begin with the end in mind, right? That's always where we want to start. And anytime I go into a conversation, I fix myself on, is the conversation necessary? Because we have this tendency to want to address everything in every moment. And if you're not checking whether or not it's a necessary conversation, that can also cause other emotion. If you're just trying to have the conversation to get something off of your chest, we have that tendency to take that posture. So I love that point around making sure that the intention and the motive is right, because when we're needing to address something, oftentimes what you're checking is you being weird in conversation, right? That other person has no clue what we're about to talk about. So you're needing to get it processed in your head. So rehearsing is a part of any preparation that I do. But if I do the send the sticky note, we need to talk, I make sure I put a topic on there, because helping that person prepare for it as well. Because if they come in with a blank piece of paper, they're in receive mode and they're feeling like immediately walking into a conversation, I'm about to be talked at instead of created dialogue. And so you're not.
Hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Hold on a minute. I just felt the heavens move. You said, is the conversation necessary? First of all, you also said that you may be talking at and people
Mhm.
can sense that
Oh
energy,
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
People can sense that energy. Go on.
Yeah.
I
No.
just had to sit there
Yeah.
a minute.
Yeah. And what they're sensing is you being awkward.
Mm,
Because if you process, and the reason why I changed the word to necessary is because just think about if everybody in the group and everybody on right now, think about when you say the word crucial or difficult and
right.
hard, right? We're all coaches here, right? So you don't even want to sign up for a difficult conversation. You don't want to sign up for a hard conversation. Like, so you got to reframe some things for yourself before engaging. So my little 3 E's that I use when I go in one to engage. First of all, just to help them understand I'm here. I've showed up and I'm present for you in this conversation, but also educate, right? So they may not be aware of why it's a thing for you or their behavior, right? Because again, we all understand as coaches and leaders, you engage and you respond to behavior, not feelings and emotions, because that can become very subjective, right?
Right.
That's like the person you ask, what's wrong with you? And you're like, that's my face, right? And it's like why you ask me what's wrong? You don't like my face, right?
Right.
So you engage, you go in with the mindset, I'm going to be educated or help educate. And then there should be that due out is some level of empowerment because you want them to leave ready to take ownership and accountability of something, right? And for yourself, be on the receiving end of, okay, what do I need as homework and some things I need to get better on? So we engage, we educate, we empower, and then repeat because there's a check-in, right? You just don't let people go to the 4 wins because again, they repeat what you respond to and you check in on, right? So you need to begin to address behavior as it's seen, as it heard, and not just, well, that's a one-off, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe they just had a bad day or whatever. Nah, we finna address this now because I need you to know I see you, I hear you, I value you, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
want you to begin repeating behavior that's not desirable. And I think that's really one of the biggest things that when we have these crucial conversations in these moments, the intent of the conversation is, again, to be necessary. And we're wanting to engage and show people our values that we're leading through and living our lives through, particularly on the organizational level. And when you don't engage, you're making a decision. Like you said, you're making a decision and you're actually training people how to treat and engage with you. Right. So that's one thing, again, we always have to be very mindful of. If it's
Mm-hmm.
difficult, and understand, do that self-work. I love that. I love that you said that and that you've been modeling that from a self-awareness standpoint, because if you don't work on that and
Mm-hmm.
you're lead yourself well first,
Mm-hmm.
how can you expect others to follow you?
Oh my gosh. Where do I start? So the self-awareness part is incredibly important. And one of the reasons why this is so important right now is because there are very few outlets to address what's happening right now, right? Like normally if I get upset, I work out of my home office, I'll go to Starbucks. Well, while we're in quarantine, nobody could do that, right? You might meet up with your friends, or you might go to church, or whatever those things are. Those things have really been locked down. Now they're starting to free up a little bit, but basically what people end up doing is holding it in. And for the first 3 weeks of quarantine, long before the George Floyd thing happened, what I realized is that as a being in the helping profession, being in a helping profession, I was holding things in, right? And so I was putting band-aids and tape on stuff, trying to keep it together. And that didn't go very well after about 3 weeks. So for those of you that are in this community and you're watching the live stream, maybe you're watching it on replay, um, I'd love to know, has that happened to you where you just realized that you weren't taking care of yourself, you weren't checking in, you weren't doing any of those things? That's critical. And guess what? It's completely normal. I also want to just call out that there's a time to ask for help. We can do it on our own for a minute, but then things start to fall apart. Thank you, Lawrence, for sharing that. Just so many good nuggets in there. Hilary, I want to pop it over to you for a minute. I'd like for you just to kind of share what has resonated with you in this conversation and then just kind of give your perspective on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first, for those who don't know, I've worked with Karen, not as a coach, but as a learner, learning from. I was coached by Karen. Um, so a lot of what she says is very personal because I've used a lot of that in my work. Here's a couple of things that I got out of that. So instead of saying I need to talk with you or we need to talk, transitioning that language to I'd like to hear from you about, right? Because everybody wants a seat at the table and everybody wants to contribute. Where I have found some really great success is starting with that and saying, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on something. Now, I may have my agenda and where I want to go, but because I don't know how to navigate that road with them until I know where they're at and what their thinking is.
Really good.
It also allows me the ability to identify a place where I can guide them to where I want, but it also gives me insight as to maybe they've already thought that direction. They just need some assistance to get there.
Wow.
So that's, asking people for their thoughts first. We often talk about making room. Karen, you say it all the time, make room at the table.
Mm-hmm.
But we invite them to the table, and this happens in corporate quite a lot.
Yeah.
We invite people to the table, and then we never allow them to speak.
Mm.
Yeah. It's because we're not ready for what they have to say. Because we're coming in with our agenda, right? We know where we want to go, and we have so much to say. We gotta pause. We gotta pause and let people speak, and hear them. Mm-hmm. Because when we it's the golden rule, right? Treat others the way you want to be treated. Right. When we allow them to talk, they are more likely to hear us talk.
Mm. Say that again. Say that one more time.
When we allow them to talk, they're more likely to allow us to talk.
This is so powerful. And, we've all had hard conversations. Either as leaders, we've had to facilitate hard conversations, or maybe we've been the subject of a hard conversation. But one of the things that happens of the conversation, and this is what's happening to a lot of us, right? If you have brown skin, then you may feel triggered by someone coming up to you and saying, how are you doing? Or maybe you hear something from someone that you perceived as a friend and you feel like what you're hearing isn't friendly. Or maybe you have white skin and you hear something that hurts you deeply. Maybe you hear the term white fragility and it triggers you. It makes you mad. It hurts your feelings or offends you. That is very real. And despite how right we may be, you can be right and wrong at the same time. And so one of the things that I want to highlight is that as we have difficult conversations about race, about employment, about politics, we always have to remember that dialogue, and Lawrence said this earlier, which I thought was so brilliant, dialogue is about an exchange of content, an exchange of information. So if you go into it locked and loaded, ready to blow the person out of the water, you may have emotion. Hear me. This is not about, rainbows and unicorns. And I like unicorns, but that's not what this is about. This is about owning. This is about owning the fact that I feel angry. I feel hurt. It's okay to say that and to acknowledge that. That's that self-awareness piece. But what Hilary is talking about, and I think you said it earlier about building a bridge, boom, that's everything. Building a bridge in conversation You remember I also said earlier about thinking about the outcome. Think about the outcome of that conversation, right? Maybe it's a coworker and you've got to work together. You may want to put them in their place, but what outcome do you want it to look like? Do you need to get that project done? And is what you're about to say going to facilitate that, or will it hold it back? It does not mean that you don't have the emotion. And let me say something else that may make some of y'all unfriend me. But here it is. In the process of talking about especially race, one of the things that I've had to recognize is that the person sitting across the table from me is not ultimately responsible for my story. Sorry. The person sitting across from me is not ultimately responsible for my story. They may be responsible for our relationship and navigating that, but in any environment, in any conversation, right? A counselor would tell you, a Black counselor, a white counselor, any kind of counselor would say, the other person is not ultimately responsible for your story. That healing has to come inside of us. When we hear things that are painful for us, we have to have context and we have to be willing to say, you know what? I'm upset in the moment, right? We have to judge the issue and not the person. Okay, I'm gonna get off my pulpit for a minute. Lawrence, what would you say to that?
Yeah. So you sparked something with me. Because that goes back to I had an old colonel who used to tell me never miss the opportunity to repeat myself. And when we're talking about the day and age that we're in, you have to help the other person also hear you correctly, right? Because
Mm,
people, the how can I help question has come up a lot. And you have
mm,
to help them understand that you don't need help with your emotions from them, because that's the sympathy creeping in. That's them wanting to hear your heart and be that shoulder. Like, no, I need you to be an advocate and an ally. If you want to know what that definition is, Webster has a good one. But this is what this looks like in this moment for movements, for organizations. I just need you to help me feel respected in our dialogue. And that's the space I need you to come to these conversation with, right? I'm seeking to understand. Everybody needs to come in with that empathetic ear
mm-hmm.
of what action can I take? And then here's the key. What am I willing to do after we have
Wow.
this conversation?
Wow.
Because again, you've seen this, and we've all seen this with a client. Ultimately, they have to sign up for something.
Right.
And in conversation, I don't need your sympathy. I need your empathy. And I need what's the first thing you're willing to do? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's a process for yourself. So I'm releasing you. I'm not owning any parts of your outcomes. You have to sign up for something. And when I hear you say that, I'm also thinking about that person, and I'm watching their body language when I'm telling my story. I need you to be present with me. That's my experience,
Uh-huh.
right? That's empathy, right? The old school empathy, you gotta be able to walk a mile in somebody's shoes. No, that was never empathy. That was you trying to potentially, I say you were potentially trying to take away from my story by you trying mentally to put yourself in my shoes. It's not gonna happen. I've
Mm-hmm.
never been Hilary and I've never been Karen. I would
Mm-hmm.
not disrespect your experience like that by
Mm-hmm.
trying to put myself in your shoes. I need to hold the space to understand where you've been, so I may help and partner while you're leading and walking over that bridge, while you connect the dots to that better version of yourself.
Wow.
And so I need to be present for that. I need to stay available for that, right? When I need to hold the space, if that solitary thug tear rolls down your cheek, I need to be present for that, because
Mm-hmm.
I need to ask the next question of, what'd you just feel?
Yeah. You unpacked so much there. So for a minute, let's talk a little bit about the dynamics of these conversations, because one of the things that I've heard in the white community is I'm afraid to say anything. I'm afraid. I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, or I'm processing. And I want to unpack that a little bit, because I think there are some things that I think are really powerful just about human dynamics. Race is a loaded issue. And it doesn't matter where in what environment you go in, it's going to be a loaded issue. And so it's loaded for people of color, and it's loaded for our Caucasian friends and allies, and it's loaded for people who want to be our allies. So I think sometimes we have to take a step back, and so much of what we see on the news is anger, 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 anger. So it's easy to ascribe that dynamic to the person that's sitting next to you that maybe was not at a protest, but they look like people who were at the protest. So we kind of make this blanket, statement. It's also true to make a blanket statement for, our Caucasian friends. Well, white people don't understand or whatever. And that's a very hurtful thing to say. It would be a hurtful thing to say if somebody said it to you. So I think it's really, really important to take a step back. Heidi Leckenbach. Hi, Heidi. Heidi is one of my sister girls. And she says something really important. She says, if we don't acknowledge our feelings, they can often be transferred as judgment to other people. I mean, that's a wisdom nugget right there. If we don't acknowledge what we're feeling, we can transfer that to someone else. That is so powerful. And so I think it's important to remember that just because somebody is sitting across from you and they don't look like you does not mean they are the enemy. I'll let that sink in a minute. It does not mean that they're the enemy. It also does not mean that they should know what to say. Hello? They may not know what to say. So I think there's a role that we can play in the African American community as well about kind of understanding and owning our own feelings, accepting and recognizing that the person sitting across from us is not responsible for our story. There may be ways that they can honor us. Now, this is just me, so don't y'all send me any nasty grams because I ain't gonna read them. But this isn't about not recognizing that maybe they can honor you, and everybody's different. For me, there were people that I expected to hear from as this national crisis unfolded, just because I thought, this is my boo, this is my roadie, and I'm struggling in the moment. And so the perception was these people know me well enough, but instead what I heard a lot of, I didn't know what to say. And let me just speak to that with great empathy and great love. If somebody that you love was in a burning building, your kid, your boo, whoever that was, you would run into that building. If you're as crazy as I am, you'd run into that building and drag them out by their hair if you had to. You wouldn't ask questions. You wouldn't get a firefighter's manual. You wouldn't pray about it. You'd go get them. You'd go get them. And then you'd say, are you okay? People call me, I've got an amazing network, and they'd be like, girl, did you hear about so-and-so? Are you okay? Did you hear what happened? Like, just that checking in is okay. The flip side of that is that I've heard people say, I am so tired of people asking me, Florence, we were talking about this, if I'm okay. Like, just say, hey, good morning, whatever. I'm not holding you to my story. So I think that's really important. Hilary, I would love for your I would love your perspective on this.
So there's a lot there. So let me just say, as a white person, right? I might see somebody, and this is probably something I haven't shared very openly, but you see someone in the grocery store and you say, hey, you smile, whatever. Sometimes I find myself going out of my way to smile bigger to someone of color because I am worried they're looking at me thinking I'm one of those. Wow. I live in Cherokee County, and we have some special circumstances here sometimes, and I always worry, are they thinking I'm one of those? I don't want them to think that. And you find yourself like subconsciously like smiling bigger, and you're like, hi.
Right. I come in peace.
That's so stupid. I mean, but it's sort of like, we start to raise our voice when we know someone's deaf. They still can't hear us, but we raise our voice anyway. It's kind of a subconscious thing. And a good friend of mine said, and she's actually Black, and she said, She said, some of my friends didn't check in on me. And I said, you have to remember that doesn't mean that they're not thinking of you.
Mm-hmm.
We have to make sure that we don't imply what we're thinking. Because honestly, I think a lot of people just aren't empathetic enough. I think there's a lot of us, it took me till I was 40 to understand that the amount of empathy that I feel and have is actually not very common. Like it's something that it can be developed. It's not something you have or you don't have, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people haven't developed it to the point to
Right.
where they think, I need to check on that person. A lot of people are just in their space. They're worrying about their kids, right? And there's been a lot going on, so they're worrying about their kids and their family and their husband and their house and what's going on and whether or not they can see their grandparents. They're not, it's just not a conscious, I'm not going to pick up the phone and call my friend.
Right.
And I think that that's important too, is that we sometimes immediately think that somebody is just not caring about us.
Yeah. That is so powerful. I'm so glad that you said that. And what was interesting, I took some vacation time with my family and another family that is in our church. They happen to be a white family. And she said, well, Karen, I didn't call, because I didn't think I needed to. And I said, you didn't. Now, there were some people that I wanted to hear from because I treasure them and they're a source for me, right? But I didn't need to hear from everybody. And so I think we have to make space for that. I love what you said, Hilary, that oftentimes people don't know how to navigate difficult conversations. And what I want to just put out there is that forgiveness is a leadership strategy. Woo! I just got chills. Forgiveness is a leadership strategy. Forgiveness says that I release you from having to own my story. I release you from having to know what to do next or knowing what to do now. Um, Forgiveness says, let's move forward together. Let's figure this out together, right? So when you're having that conversation, that difficult conversation, before you have that conversation, check where you are. And particularly if you're the one initiating it and your emotions are high, check yourself. Check yourself first. Go into that conversation. I love the way Hilary put it, where she said, I would love your thoughts on X, right? That's something that I had to learn because I move really fast. And, I was born in New York and I'm a sister and all like that. And I can say that. And I go into a conversation with my husband or my kids and I'm like, I need 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. Right. I do that and they don't know but they know something's coming, but they don't know what it is. And so I love, Hilary talking about setting it up ahead of time and making sure that you say, I'd love your thoughts on the conversation that we had yesterday. I felt a certain way and I just want to check in. That sets the tone to have a dialogue. Or maybe it was you, Hilary, that was talking about dialogue. I think I attributed it to Lawrence, but I think we were talking about, it takes two people to have that conversation. So we want to make sure that there's an exchange, a give and take. I share, you share, and then we commonly, together, we come to how do we move forward. I've had some very painful conversations with people I adore throughout this entire season coming out of the George Floyd conversation. And I had to make some decisions about whether or not I was going to judge them, whether or not I was going to work for them or work with them. And there's a book, I've got it somewhere on my shelf that says you can't fire everybody. Y'all, we can't fire everybody because that isn't progress. And here's the truth. Terror and fear would love nothing more than to do this. Don't talk, don't say anything, right? Hold it all in. We can't do that. We cannot let darkness win in leadership or in life by just putting a muzzle over our own mouths. So making sure that you check in, making sure that you build a bridge. I love that, Hilary, to bring them into the conversation. And it's okay to be honest, but I think it's important that we cannot just vomit all over everybody. Pardon my expression, but that's what comes across. And this happened, and that happened, and I don't believe this happened, and blah, 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 blah. And the person ends up feeling like this, like, whoa, I don't know what to do with all of that. I've seen it play out in the workplace. I've seen it play out in homes. I've seen it play out in churches. Come on, in ministry environments where there is so much. Now, there are some environments where, therapeutic healing environments and that sort of thing, where people need to process, right? We're going to do another show on sitting with grief and sitting with rage. That is very real. And right now, it's happening in every community. People are emotional and they're just spouting. We need to talk about that because there's a way to go about doing it to really bring in the conversation. Heidi says, best class ever. Thank you, Heidi. Appreciate that. She says, also forcing a muzzle on others because we don't agree with one another. Come on, wisdom nugget. We cannot say, we want to be heard, 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 and not make space. Lawrence, I think you were talking about that earlier, and not make space for the other person. Really, really incredible. So we got to navigate these back and forths. Hilary, I'd like to start with you on this next question, and maybe you can unpack for us as we talk about, kind of moving forward and having relationships with people that may be different, that may believe differently than we do in the workplace, especially. For a moment, let's talk about that, so that for those folks that are going into environments, either in places they're volunteering or places they're working, they have some tangible strategies. If you could leave us with maybe 2 or 3 things to remember having difficult workplace conversations, what would you share?
Okay, so 2 things. First, write this down for later. Another leadership strategy. You said forgiveness is a leadership strategy. Apologizing is a leadership strategy.
Ooh, now you're getting in people's business. My goodness.
Yeah, that's
talk about that,
really
Hilary.
Important. Okay, so it is really important I find, to be able to know that when maybe your emotions were too high, maybe you talked too much, to self-identify and realize that you made a mistake. Leaders, I always thought leaders were supposed to be perfect, right? But they're not. And I love, Richard Sheridan talks about it in Joy Inc. And he talks about the ability to come back to somebody and said, hey, I was thinking about our conversation yesterday and I didn't like how I said da 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 da, or I acted this way. I felt that I did this. I want to say I'm sorry. And the releasing yourself, but also showing them that you're not perfect and that you don't think that you are, is so powerful in creating bridges that it's just one of the most important leadership strategies that I've learned.
Can you go back real quickly and just, for those that may be joining late, can you just explain a little bit about that concept of building a bridge? What's the purpose of building a bridge, particularly in work relationships?
Well, I mean, especially in a work relationship, right? We need each other. Mm-hmm. We need each other to be successful. There really isn't the concept of I can climb the ladder or do what it is I'm supposed to do without other people. That just really doesn't exist. Right. So by building a bridge, what I'm saying is that we want to incorporate both people's perspective and experiences, pulling them together, creating some sort of equality. And it may not ever be equal, but some sort of a foundation for us to communicate on. The bridge becomes the relationship that allows us to communicate and work together well.
Mm-hmm.
Even if where we're at in some places is very different, it's the commonalities, it's the things that we share, it's experiences, it's conversations, it's the relationship. And so for me, that's really, really important. Sometimes it's just keying in on somebody's fear. I know that as I'm going through a lot of what I do with software change, there's a lot of fear. And it's being able to identify that and say, tell me about that. Tell me, what's your worst fear? Get it out on the table. The CEO that I've been recently working with said, I really am the elephant on the table type of person. So let's just name it and talk about it. And I love that because it allows us to just be aware of it and be able to talk about it. That creates a relationship.
Wow. So good, Hilary. Thank you for that. Lawrence, as we kind of wrap up, maybe 2 or 3 things that that you would share as we have conversations, especially for our leaders, folks that are going into conversations where maybe, the stakes are high and they have to continue working or serving with others.
Yeah, I would first start, and my brother Theory jumped in there, and particularly around as you check your opinions and intention of a conversation, process, are the things you're going to say, are they assumptions, right? Because again, we talk about our intention, we talk about the posture in which we go into these conversations, because we need to understand that if we go in curious, not confrontational, we lead with questions, and that in our eyes do something, our bodies do something when we're more curious than confrontational. And it's really almost that, would you put a 10-year-old behind the wheel of a car and tell them to just drive? No, you wouldn't. So it's that whatever you can do to get yourself posturing. And again, understanding you don't know how this person's going to respond. But if I come across curious and even say the word out loud as you're practicing, hey, I'm just curious, like where'd that come from, or what caused you to feel that way? And then the second thing is check in before the crucial conversation, because the idea is to build the muscle of conversation.
It's good,
right? Because you're building trust, you're building confidence, you're building all those things when you're not only checking in on performance, but you're checking on the person. Again, start with the heart. If I know anytime I have a conversation with you, you respect the person of me and not just what I can do for you, that also helps conversation, right? And so you go in mitigating as many assumptions as possible, and you lead with questions. But then that second one, again, check in before it's crucial or difficult to again build that muscle. It's about reps, right? It's just like an athlete. Like you're not gonna go on a field on Sunday and be like, all right, let's do it. No, there's practice, there's preparation, there's gym time, there's summertime 2-a-days, there's all of those things before you ever get into that game time situation. We have to build this muscle. And again, this stuff can be learned. You just got to be willing. You got to sign up for it.
So good. There's so many nuggets here. I've tried to write while I'm talking, and it doesn't work very well. But I know that so many of you in this community have taken great notes. And I would love to continue this conversation at some point, but I just want to kind of start to kind of circle the wagons a little bit and leave you with a few key things. So I think it's important that we just kind of summarize, like we've talked about in conversation. Lawrence, I think you said that, and I want to highlight that because we didn't really talk about that. But when you're coming out of a conversation, a difficult conversation, make sure to summarize what you've talked about. Make sure to summarize what you have heard, and give the person the opportunity to say, is that, to answer the question, is that right? I heard you say such and such and such and such. One of the other things, and I should have started with this, is that difficult conversations need to be time bound. The reality is that you cannot, just sit and have somebody yell and scream at you or share difficult information over long periods of time. And in my work as an executive coach, working with organizations and leaders, one of the things that I talk to them about is to make sure that your conversations are time bound. But also remember that if you have a 30-minute conversation, you cannot unpack 15 things you're ticked off about, right? We have to oftentimes pick our battles. What is the outcome? What are we trying to achieve? I need this person to respect me. Well, what does that look like, right? Unpack that. Because if you say to somebody, I need you to respect me, well, what does that mean, right? It's kind of a loaded question. And oftentimes, and particularly in these conversations about race and that sort of thing, people, and I've seen this play out. I've facilitated some of these conversations. People are like, I thought I was respecting you. Like, it's very easy to come into it loaded. So make sure that you think about what outcome that you want and be specific about what that looks like, so people will have a handle on how they can engage you, how they can help. Um, uh, One of the things that I have heard, particularly in the white community, is the question, and in the Black community as well, particularly in the helping professions, is where am I supposed to process, right? How am I supposed to get help? I'm answering all these questions. Who's going to listen to me? And so I want to give voice to that, just because I recognize that, it is absolutely imperative that as leaders, that, like we talked about at the beginning, that we get the help that we need. This community is a positive and productive place. We are a diverse community, and I'm for all of you. If somebody comes for my white friend, I'm coming for you, not because you're not right, but because if there's something that does not promote dignity and respect in the relationship, then we've gone against the entire mission of this community, and vice versa. So I think that's very important, to have positive communities and places where you can get filled. I'll just give a plug for Aronde Creighton, who was our guest last week, who is doing some powerful work in the African American community, creating safe spaces for African American leaders to process. Why? Because what we're experiencing right now is traumatic, and we need to have places like that. I want to encourage you, if you have not leveraged your medical benefits, if you have the luxury of having medical benefits, look into your EAP at work, leverage your health insurance, and make an appointment with a licensed mental health professional or a medical professional. Make that appointment. I have done that. Okay, there's no shame in that. There is incredible wisdom in knowing when to ask for help, knowing when to go to see somebody who can help you navigate that space. If you need some referrals, please reach out to us, DM us. I would love to share some referrals with you. Tap into your communities of faith. I know it's difficult right now, and I know many people are making decisions about whether or not they will continue their faith. Let me just tell you, this is the time when the faith community needs to be leading, and I just want to tell you that they are. If you've never heard of the One Race community, this is a powerful ministry that is stepping out into the deep, and they are declaring that darkness will not win in powerful places. It's an ecumenical organization. They've invited people from all communities of faith to jump in and get involved in places like that. That can be an amazing place to kind of tap into hope. Let's see, what else? Your elders. In one of our recent Monday Morning Jumpstarts, I had my godfather, or my son's godfather, my spiritual father, and my pastor on. These are two men that are leading in the space. They love me, but they are also experienced leaders in their own right. So tap into that elder community that you have, that neighbor. Ask them how they got through. And find those trusted friends, those friends who can help you get a healthy perspective. Doesn't mean that they don't feel anything, but it means that they will not allow you to stay stuck. because the reality is we need you to lead. And Lawrence, Coach Lawrence just shared the link to the One Race movement. Please check that out. They're doing some powerful and incredible things. Harry says a belief system plays a huge role in these conversations. Good stuff, absolutely, absolutely critical. And then positive social networks. Listen to me very carefully. There's a lot of mess out there on the internet. There's a lot of negativity in the news channels. Manage what goes into your brain, manage what goes into your heart. I'm not saying don't be educated, don't be informed, but I am saying you don't need to see every news report, right? Oftentimes we need to take that energy and direct it into the places where we do have influence. Use your energy towards those places. I also want to highlight, I think it was something that Lauren said, or maybe both of you said it, and that is when you're having a difficult conversation, think about the parts of the story that matter, right? Not every story, not every, I remember when such and such is, whoa, that's a counseling issue, boo. That's not me. That happened 15 years ago. I wasn't there. Now, it does not mean that we don't hold space for those that we love, right? But it does mean that we need to recognize that we need to think about what parts of our story are important in the moment. And I'll say this, be the change that you want to see. If you want grace, give it. If you want to be heard, listen. If you want to be heard without being interrupted, be that person that listens without interrupting. And so on and so on. And when you are unpacking how you feel or what you feel, use I statements. I feel this way, right? Instead of you did this and you did that. That will put people on the defensive right away and you shut down that conversation. Share facts and avoid sarcasm and avoid criticism. Even if someone made a mistake, even if somebody did something that was offensive, sarcasm and criticism is a perfect way to shut down a conversation. Recognize that you may need to have more than one conversation. You may not get everything that you need done in one conversation. It may be multiples. And commit to that together and ask, would you be willing to have another conversation? Recognize that there's a balance between being compassionate towards someone and taking responsibility away from them, right? You can hold somebody accountable and also be compassionate. Pace yourself in the conversation. Recognize that your emotions are doing. Dr. Denise Colson, who was our guest last week, talked about some of the ways that you can do that in a powerful, crucial, difficult conversation. And finally, thank them for listening. Got to do that. Even if it's hard, even if you walk away and you decided you do not like the person and you just cannot. Thank you for listening. This is all about having powerful conversations and creating the space where we figure out how to do life on our own terms. Right now, doing life on our own terms means that we do not want to let darkness win. We do not want to let negativity and toxicity hijack our ability to be constructive members of our societies and our networks. Our leaders are counting on us. Our children are counting on us. Legacy isn't just something that is left. Legacy is something that is lived. Legacy is not just something that's left, it's lived. What kind of legacy are you living? What kind of legacy are you leaving? We can have these powerful conversations. We can go forward together, and we can do it in a way that says, you know what, we've got this. I believe in the American spirit. I'll say this, and then we're going to wrap it up. I heard somebody say in the midst of all of this, well, this is just what America is. You're on your own there, bud, because I do not believe that that's what America is. I do not believe that all of what we have with the violence and the damaging of property and the name calling and the blaming, I do not believe that that's what America is. My flag flies red, white, and blue, just like anybody else's. And I believe in the spirit of America, because America is not just brick and mortar. America is about the heart of our people. And because of that, I believe in the resiliency of our people. I believe that our economy will recover, and I believe that we're the ones to lead the way. So let me just stop and say, Coach Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just going to ask you to hold on when I stop the live stream because we're going to debrief. And Coach Hilary, thank you so much. And yes, I called you Coach Hilary on purpose. Just saying, I'm prophesying, okay? Because I think there's some things you can be doing. But I want to thank you for leading in your space. And I want to thank you for welcoming me into your life and your career journey. I'm telling y'all, Hilary needs to write a book. Some of the stuff that she has experienced has been crazy. She's got some stories to tell. And for all of you in the community, thank you for joining me for the live stream. Do me a favor. When we finish the live stream here, would you honor me by sharing it in your community? Letting people know that we're here every single Monday, 8:15 Eastern Daylight Time. We've got some powerful topics coming up. We're going to be talking about sitting with grief and sitting with rage and how to do that. You do not need to be, a swami to do that. In our everyday conversations, we need to know how to do that, both now and in the future. We're also going to be doing a session just for moms. Woo! We're going to be talking about all things quarantine, all things raising our babies during this crazy time. We're going to do it together. And so just thank you to all of you for joining us. It's been an incredible time. I'm going to now jump off, get my tea, and debrief with Coach Lawrence and Coach Hilary. But in the meantime, remember, you've got more options than you realize, beauty. I'll see you on the other side and see you next week.